about literature is that it's the only art form, really the closest way we can get to being inside the head of another person, to really understand the perspective of how another person sees the world and experiences the world. And so I think it's very enriching for people to be able to experience that through literature, to learn how other people think, and also to make us feel less lonely, to know that there are other people out there who may be experiencing or feeling similar things to what we're feeling, and to have that sense of kindred connection with other people. That I think is an important role of literature, to not only help us understand the world, but to make us feel more connected to the world and to other people in the world, and ultimately, yes, to make us feel less lonely.
Literature is connected fundamentally to culture and history, and the way that different parts of the world and different languages and different peoples are very different. And literature is an open door for people into that. And it's designed to attract a reader, to have us be sucked into a story, and then to understand a very different life, a very different culture. So for me, it's one of the fundamental driving blocks of being global. Of having a global world where we understand, where an American can live in Norway and can come to India and understand something about your culture. If I read stories about Krishna, if I read stories about Arjuna, that's going to teach me about the history and the culture here. And then literature is part of that, right? Stories develop our understanding of a foreign culture, which I think is key for all fields.
Literature is not about you wanting to become a writer, to understand poetry, to enjoy opera. It doesn't mean you have to write operas or write poetry. These are art forms that help your soul to evolve and to clarify your vision in your own field of study. So literature should be required for all departments in order for students to expand their vision.
Reading literary texts gives them an experience of enjoying the language. It's not just about grammar and getting the language right. We want them to appreciate the aesthetics, how language is used to convey experience. When students read literature, they are reading about life. And so I think it's very important that there is this engagement with text on several levels. People like Ron Carter have talked about how a reader can develop culturally, and as an individual, there's personal growth that's involved in when you read literary text, which you don't get if you were just learning the language. So one could be very proficient in the English language, but quite unaware of the important literature that exists.
I think what literature is made up of is ultimately stories, and human civilization has come this far because we all have stories to tell, to form and to retain. History, if you see the word itself, it's his story, it can be her story also. It literally is a gathering of stories and voices, right? And the danger of having a single story is that one form of power wins over others. So diversity suffers. I think a literature discipline or a literature background teaches you to respect multitude, multiplicity of voices, that everybody has a story to share, and they may be overlapping, but they may not be the same. Now, this is something that will help you across the board. If you look at amazing economists, even like Amartya Sen, ultimately at the heart of their work is the ability to listen to others, right? So he's been talking about how domestic labor needs to be monetarized in India because women contribute to GDP, but they don't make any income for themselves. I think the ability to do this is also embedded in literature because it allows you to hear women's stories, or let's say domestic workers' stories or homemakers' stories.
I think literature engenders empathy. So if you're reading a novel about someone who comes from another culture, like you're learning about their culture and you're learning how to relate to them and what they might think.
we are talking about becoming a more and more global society, but we forget that the local or multiple locals make a global, because global does not mean homogeneity. It does not mean that everybody is the same. It's actually quite the opposite, that we recognize that everybody is different and we learn to live in harmony with each other. So if students today, various syllabi do this, I'm sure your university also does this. As a member of a syllabi community, I strive to do this a lot. If we expose students to literature that is not from their background, so whether it is Dalit writing, feminist writing, African American writing, I recently recommended an Egyptian text, for instance, because we don't know enough about the Middle East and the sub-Saharan region. What it allows students, again, is yes, to encourage a genuine cosmopolitanism. It's not a checkbox, that I know this, I've been here, I've done that. No, that my needs, desires, my philosophies, my ideologies may be very different from someone who's living geographically and culturally in a different space from me. So in that sense, like I said, it also makes me think about my privileges, my limitations, how I can grow, how I can challenge, but also, if I was to live somewhere else, we're equipping students to be global in that sense. If I was to live somewhere else, I could thrive. I could have something to contribute once I know my literature as well as I have a sense of what their life is about.